to bounce with in this amazing, or at least I would like to bounce with them in this amazing bouncing castle. Composer Georg Friedrich Haas. It's a great honor to welcome you to the stage, and Mollena William-Haas. Please join us on stage. And I do have a microphone for you as well. We have to share them a little bit. Also, our conversation will be live streamed. So at some point there will be also the possibility for the audience to join in with questions. And then there will be 2 microphones for the audience. So if at that time you raise your hand and wait for the mic, the people who can watch our conversation on the Holland Festival will be able to hear all the questions and answers. So now that we've settled down from our bouncing, let's start. And I would like to start with a question to Beatrice and René, the filmmakers, because I think this project originated with them. But it's immediately a question that I think at some point we can extend to the 2 of you as well. Halfway of the film, we see a lot of texts of people commenting on your special relationship, and one of the quotes that I read and that really struck me is that there's this power balance in all relationships. And Beatrice and René, you made your first film, so this is kind of an exploration in what is the power relationship between a filmmaker or a filmmaking team and your subjects. So I was wondering if you could philosophize a little bit about that, and then we could talk about that.
Yeah, well, thank you for this really easy question to begin with, just like to get us warmed up.
Yeah, you told me there were also provocative questions I could ask, so...
You know, I'm going to give this to Mollena right now, because that's actually a really interesting question. What's our power exchange relationship?
Way to hand it off, thanks.
Yeah, I know.
Like, oh, just I would say it's hilarious because the fact that they were German and he's Austrian, I think made it like the power dynamic extra hilarious. And as the American, I'm just sitting there like, having some popcorn and snacks. They were so unobtrusive, and so their power lay in the fact that they could basically sink into the rug at any point. And it was very easy for me to not forget that they're there, because if anyone, you watch reality TV and people are like, oh, we forgot they were there. That's bullshit. You can't forget that someone's in your face. But what you can do is run out of fucks to give about that. And so like after a while, I just like, I don't even care. I'm like, I'm trying to just go pee. All right, fine, follow me to the bathroom, go ahead. Here's my butt, enjoy. And then you just go on with your day. And they absolutely staged nothing. They didn't ask us to do anything. I think the one thing that was not caught in the moment was we were getting out of the car to walk into the rehearsal for Coma. And like René was on the other side of the parking lot. He's like, wait, walk back and walk again. And so that's the only moment in the movie where we had to do something that was, you know, not entirely in the moment. Everything else, you know, was very spontaneous. The interviews just, we sat down and let them do what they wanted to do. And so this was the subtle way to power, is by laying back and letting us come to you.
I think it's called gentle dying. Probably.
I think that's also a strange mix of power exchange when you're documentary, like you are observing the people, you are following them, you have the camera on them, you have always your eye on them. And on the other side, you are running behind them because they're too fast, and you have to manage to get the best angle, and you are dependent on what they do. So there's a very fluid mix of both.
One kind of power dynamic while you're filming, but then there's the one where you're editing, and I think this is where we're totally dumbing the hell out of you guys, because in terms of, you know, you have a lot of images and it really depends on how you take them and put them together. We could have trashed you if we were like evil people. We could have gone into this very typical direction of portraying people in a BDSM relationship in a freak kind of way, like, oh my god, look at the freaks. You know, and that was the main goal, that we didn't want to do that. We just wanted to look at 2 human beings doing their thing. And I think this is where a whole different power dynamic comes in, and this is where we're still in awe of how much you trusted us, despite that you kind of didn't know it. And that you didn't interfere in that in any way, because we had this pact, this deal, that we will show them a first cut and that they can kind of veto tiny scenes if they want to, but not the entire thing. And they never vetoed anything. So everything that's on there is what we made out of it. They completely stayed out of that. And I think that's quite rare, actually.
Because I find it interesting the way you just talked about kind of the filmmaking process, being able to sink in the carpet, as Mollena so beautifully said, and at the same time run after them. So there's constant shifting of power dynamics. But with a film like this, and especially when you haven't made the documentary that's partly observational and partly consists of interviews, there's also this idea of co-authorship. So Mollena and Georg, did you at some point feel, because you're also both artists, creators, feel that you had to co-author or maybe author the film?
Well, I think that for me this is very easy. I'm a composer and the music is based on authorship, and you had plenty of struggles to get the rights. And this is another question. About what I'm saying, I just trusted them, but I should say it honestly. I did not trust you.
Okay, thanks for letting me know.
Because I don't trust anybody, except Mollena.
Mostly.
Except Mollena. And she trusted you, and I think, okay, that's fine. And maybe the answer of the power exchange relationship, the real power exchange happened when Mollena and I were not here. They made about 50 hours of documentary. And there are some things which were very important for us during the documentary process, which are only rudimentary, only small glimpses here. And this is what they did. And well, it was fine. And I don't see these ideas which I communicate as my personal, I don't own them, it's not my personal property. I'm a teacher, and of course it's not what I teach is not my property. It's my wish that what is my experience as a human being with a little bit unusual personal history, to share this with other persons. And what I really dream is that somebody finds glimpses of their own life in my life, and the way how I changed my life could help some of you to change your life too. But it's no property. I only own the music, not what I'm saying.
Let me ask one question about the music, because I think you were involved in selecting the pieces for the film. Or to what extent were you involved in that?
We were a little bit involved in this, but...
You were involved in letting them get the pieces because they were going to charge $500,000 a second or something.
Well, he actually had to advocate with his publisher to allow them to have the music for a reasonable price, because they wanted to charge like a lot of money for people who were making a movie with no budget, and we're like, they can't pay $5,000. This is not a toothpaste commercial. Although a toothpaste commercial with In Vain would be amazing.
That would be brushing your teeth in the dark. But besides from the rights issues, I guess there's some key fragments from your work that in a way also tell the story of the film.
Yeah. Of course, we've discussed which pieces we will show, and of course, HYENA must be the center and the peak of everything. But here also, they decided which part of the piece. I did not decide it, and I'm very happy that I did not decide, because I made it a good choice.
Let me also grab the mic and say, about HYENA. I understand that there's someone here from Holland Festival, is that true? In the room? Everyone wave to this gentleman here. He is selling tickets for HYENA tomorrow. I came all the way to freaking Holland, or the Netherlands, or whatever I'm supposed to call this country. You get mad if someone says Holland? Is that a thing? A little bit? You're like, it's like when people call New York the Big Apple. It's like, if you have tomorrow free and you want to see the show, please come. If you can't, go on social media and say, oh my God, I saw the show, piece of it, I gotta see the rest of it, da 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 da. Because it would be super great if the Holland Festival does well with this show. So this is my commercial. Buy the fucking tickets, or I will tell everyone that you were completely racist.
You can still do that, actually. Renee, also, you wanted to say something, or you're completely overwhelmed now?
That was before the commercial. I just wanted to say that there was also in the selection of music a lot of trust Georg put in us, because basically he used his music for telling the story of their life. And it was very interesting also after we had the first draft card, how Georg, we were really anxious about like what will Georg think about like how we used his music, and we were really happy that he understood what our ideas were.
Could you give an example of a piece that's really spoke to you and that felt really in its place in the film?
For me it was like, for us, there's this moment in the film after Trump got elected, and both of them had really to struggle with the situation and like this breathe in, breathe out. For this moment he used this piece of Georg in memoriam to Eric Garner, which is a piece about this
Police brutality.
Yeah, the police brutality in the US, and which also is linked to the whole situation of like why is someone like Trump voted, and all this plays into this scene if you have the background of the music, and so we put this, and for us it was a really strong moment, and the scene, yeah, and, for sure he got the point.
You agree with that, Georg? That they choose to write music in that particular scene, which is also kind of a key hinge point in the film, I think.
Yes, of course. Yeah. But well, it's difficult for me because I don't really understand my music in the same way as the audience does. Because each of my pieces, in some ways, could be used in this place. Because all what I'm doing is based on this struggling.
Pain.
But well, but it's yeah, but it's also the question which part of the piece. And I found a piece where the expressivity and the sadness is really clearly formalized, and it's beautiful, it's fine.
Something that really struck me watching the musicians in the first piece of the film where it was made for the opening of the Elb Theater in Hamburg, is that you actually also could talk about music as a form of dominion and submission.
Oh,
That's
yes.
his favorite topic.
It's my favorite topic. I'm an Internet, if I say it, public. It's very, I think composing is a kind of a dominant and submissive situation. And there are very few situations in our society where one person is allowed to tell other persons how exactly they have moved their fingers, how they have to breathe if they play a bass instrument, and of course there is the same mysticism in it, which is in the sadomasochistic ritual. And I got conscious about this when I composed serial music.
Serial music? Like music for breakfast?
No. No, not for serial killers. The post-Schoenbergian, absolutely constructed music. Everything was constructed already. But I still got an emotional reaction. And then I even find I made mistakes. And also I made mistakes in my construction. I got emotional reactions. And then I understood why. Because I forced these poor instrumentalists to play these complicated rhythms and these complicated melodies and pitches, and they are struggling to get it, and this struggling creates an emotional reaction. And then I decided, okay, Georg, this is too cheap for you. You can't go this way, and I decided to choose sounds where I get these emotional reactions by the sound and by the music itself, and not by the act of submission of the performers.
You're so generous.
Do you care to comment on that, Mollena? Because you're now rehearsing for the Dutch premiere of HYENA, which you just advertised so eloquently, which is also a collaboration between the two of you, where you're working in your own right as a storyteller and a librettist, I would say, for this, but also maybe submitted to the music or to the composition. So from your profession, how does that work?
I will say what to me is the most important part of this film is HYENA, and not because I get to be fancy and perform on stage, but because you see that despite the fact that I am submissive, I am, consider myself to be owned by him, he has the final word on anything I do, rather than it being somewhere where I am oppressed and where I am constrained. I am not only freed, I'm given an opportunity that as an actor, as a performer, you never get. The average actor does not have a world-famous composer write the music for their story. And so the fact that I can say I am submissive and then...
But there are only very few storytellers on your quality, darling. Don't do it because I love her. I do it because she's an amazing artist.
He's the cutest. It keeps him alive.
But please continue what you were telling us.
It's really important because when we first started seeing each other, my kinky friends were like, this is great. And my non-kinky friends were like, this is great, but you're spending all of your time doing his shit. You have your own shit to do. What's gonna happen? And for the first year, I didn't know. And we had some growing pains because basically we met and we're like, nice to meet you, let's have a relationship, move into my house. Because we were like, well, fuck it, what's the worst thing that happens? We go back to where we were. We're not kids anymore. And so for the first year, I did start to wonder, am I just never gonna be able to do a show? Because you need to be in one place to do theater, traditionally. I could do storytelling events, but I could never stop and do a play. I need 6 weeks where we're not on the road, and that never happened. And then what I realized was that by submitting to the situation and saying, I don't know what's going to happen, but I trust that the universe has plentiful wealth in store for me, so I'm just gonna go with this. And within a year and a half, we had the seeds of the idea for this piece. And I'm now traveling all over the world, on stage at the, was it the Opera House in Vienna?
Theater an der Wien.
Whatever. It's very fancy, they have a lot of gold shit on the ceiling, it's nice. It's old, Mozart was there. And so for me to be like a kid who grew up in the ghetto, in the projects, poor as shit, with my weird, crazy childhood, to now be standing on stage talking about the most humiliating and horrible point of my life, and having people go, yeah, I relate to that, is stunning. And this is an opportunity I would never have had I not submitted to him and his art. So I have a great deal of respect for what I did. I'm very proud that I took that risk. And my hope is that folks who see this will realize that power exchange relationships don't always mean that you give up yourself and receive nothing. It's called a power exchange. It's not a power coup d'etat, you know? You have to have a lot of guts to give that to someone, and they have to have a lot of guts to accept it. So.
And how does your background as a storyteller and a performer actually help you in doing that, Mollena?
Probably the fact is that when I'm in performance mode, that shyness, and because I have really terrible social anxiety that I didn't realize until I got sober. Because it's very easy to have a couple of glasses of wine before you go out for dinner and you don't think about it. But then when I was sober and I realized that I was having panic attacks because my phone rang and someone asked me out for coffee, you know, I realized that I had a very serious issue. But when I'm telling a story, I don't have that. Like, that falls away and I'm like, it's about the story. And what helped me here in the movie and in watching it was that I said, you know what, this is not about my anxiety. This is not about my fear. This is about me telling the story so that someone else can see themselves, you know? I mean, I'm like a fat middle-aged woman, and fat middle-aged women are not celebrated in society generally, especially not brown ones. And so the first time I saw myself larger even than my large life, with like my guts all over the screen, and I was like, oh my God, woo, woo, that's a lot of me, holy shit. And then I had several people who were, you know, female identified people who said to me, I cried when I saw that. Because if you could do that, I could be proud of myself. That is some life-changing shit. Like you know, the fact that I was able to like be like, I am this story, that's all, I'm gonna let go of the ego and just be present, meant that someone else had a moment where they felt like they were seen, and that's magic.
Because your nodding is kind of helping in bringing kind of a positive representation to the screen. Was that a goal of the film?
Yes, absolutely. The whole point, apart from this story being juicy and fun, was the point of representing in a different way. Because I'm like, in my real life, I'm a film critic, so I watch a lot of shitty movies, which is my job, to watch them and tell you not to watch them. And you're welcome. It's a horrible job, believe me. But you see so many films and you see so many modes of representation, and they're all the same. You know, everyone is thin, everyone is young, everyone's white, everyone's heterosexual, everyone's cisgender, and that's fucking boring. And this story has so many aspects in it, you know, in terms of body politics, actual politics, race, gender, sexuality and fun, Nazis, for God's sakes.
And bacon.
And bacon. There were so many things that we could draw from, and we decided and promised ourselves that we will do this in a respectful way, without you know, going into like the freak show version of it, because that would be boring. But that we will also not spare anyone of bodies or spanking scenes or other stuff that you would kind of like proactively cut out because you censor yourself. We didn't do that, so we put everything that happened, we put into this film more or less, because it's really important to see that, and also to kind of, if you're not kinky and you're like, oh my God, spanking, like, okay, you suffer through that for a couple of minutes, because you feel a little weird and maybe a little creepy, but I think you have a learning experience from that in some kind. And even if it's just the one that you survived, the spanking scene.
I would like to say, in addition to the spanking scene, the naked greased oil wrestling scene,
oh, yes.
Someone here wrote an article and said that he was covering me in Vaseline. He is not, don't do that. Don't cover someone in Vaseline, it's a petroleum product. I was so upset. They were like, look at this great article, I'm like, it's not Vaseline. That was my takeaway, so please, don't cover your partner in Vaseline.
I think that's a good moment maybe to open up for a question
we cover our partner
from the audience. I see a hand over there, the mic's coming your way.
Hi, so you were talking about how your experience with consensual power exchange helped you maybe to practice better consent with your musicians. And so I was wondering if maybe you guys could speak a little bit about how practicing explicitly negotiated and consensual power exchange helps you to notice those non-consensual power dynamics that you participate in and transform them through consent also.
Nice.
Well, it's very obvious, because consent is the important thing. And
I was like, I will say one of the things I think that he realized, taking a master-slave relationship from years of fantasy to reality, is that there's a lot of responsibility on his end. And the responsibility to obtain consent and to give consent, and what I think a lot of people don't get is that the dominant people also need to have their consent received as well, and it needs to be ongoing. And what you begin to see, you know, when you're first a pervert, you're like, everything is kinky. And you walk into like the grocery store and you're like, I could put this in someone's butt. I could hit someone with that. Like everything becomes perverted. And so when you're in a power exchange relationship, everything becomes about who is dominant and who is submissive. And what's amazing about it, and I think what Georg started to realize, is that we do this every day all the time, but we don't give a name to it. And when you are at work, someone is the top and someone is the bottom. When you are getting on the bus, someone is topping you and getting on in front of you. When you're, you know, when you are dealing with people in your family. I mean, the ultimate MS relationship really is like parents and kids. But there's a switching going on because the parents are really submitting to the kids, but the parents also have to dominate the kids as well. And so that power dynamic flows back and forth and then, of course, shifts as the kids leave the house. And so I think part of what I found, and I think I've watched Georg come into this, I'm kind of answering for you, is that there is a clarity that comes into previously fuzzy parts of your life. If you look at it in terms of who has the power, who are they using the power justifiably, justly, and compassionately, because that's very important for us. And if they're not, what are you prepared to do? This is the thing that I have challenged Georg with from the moment we met. What are you prepared to do when something is not working? And obtaining consent is a great way to start with that. So I think that that's been, would you say that's accurate?
Yes.
Yeah.
And to go back to your question about music, this theory which I had about serial music and the DS relationship between composer and performer, I published this before I became kinky in 2000-something, 2001 or something like this. This was an abstract thinking before, and of course I think maybe this is one of my most beautiful experiences, being a dominant or being a sadist. You have some terrible fantasies which remain fantasies you never could want to realize them. And then you meet somebody for whom it is fun, desire, and even a mystical experience to accept this. And to understand that the play of pain or submission and giving pain and receiving pain, giving submission, receiving submission, is a kind of a spiritual thing in this moment when both partners want to do it. This is a wonderful thing. And in these great moments when a performer performs music which they really love, it's the same. When a violinist plays a Bach sonata, he is submissive to the things which Bach has written. But it is such a deep fun, a deep joy, a deep luck, a deep spiritual experience to submit to it, because there is something which is, and this is what where I see the paradox.
Yeah, and you became aware of it, right? You're like paying attention. Yeah. Like that awareness was something that happened definitely as a result of acting this relationship. He has one piece where what is the anachronism? What is the guy who plays the thing that's terrible? What instrument is that? Clarinet? What is it? The oboe, okay. So the oboe is not an easy instrument, right? And so we're at like Carnegie Hall, in the small hall, and this soloist comes out, sets up 5 music stands, and unrolls the piece across all 5. Why? Because he doesn't have 1 fucking second to turn a page. And so dude gets up there, and he's like, and like veins are popping in his head, and he's purple, and I'm like, and Georg is like,
You forget a very important moment. I have no break to breathe in the full piece. And I write, breathe whenever you want. And he did not want it.
This is a trick. Don't ever be fooled by this. This is the dominant trick. Oh, breathe when you want. You don't really want to breathe though, do you?
I can see some people gasping for air. There's a question over there.
First of all, I really like the thing that it's such a loving thing that you do, that you made this movie. And I'd like to have two questions. I myself work as a therapist for addiction and also for kinky people, and now I'm wondering for Mollena.
Yay! Thank you.
What's the place for addiction and BDSM in your relationship? Is there a connection between taking care of yourself, and how does that play into your role?
That's 100%. Actually, we do have a contract. It's not a lot of stuff, but basically it's a, you know, to bring back to consent, it's giving and receiving consent for basic things. And in our contract it specifies that I am not to relapse, but if I do, the requirement is that I get help immediately. Yeah? And if I do not, then this is grounds for termination of the relationship in and of itself, even if there's no other issue. And so this motivates me, you know, because I love to say that every day is sunny and happy, but it is not. And there are always, there's very rarely times that I don't crave alcohol. Actually, I'm one of those people for whom it twisted into like a nausea. If I smell it, I get very sick, so I don't have that emotional or physical craving. But sometimes I do want to check out. I would love to just be able to check out, and I get very angry that I can't do what normal people do and kick back with some friends and have a few beers and relax. I will never be able to do that. Then I get resentful and then I get angry. And then I say, look at my life and how it is now. That is due to my sobriety. Do I want to lose that? And so the submission to him means I have to submit to sobriety as well, which I do every day that I wake up and I go to bed and I say, I didn't drink today. That's great. You know, and that's every day I say that prayer to myself before I fall asleep. Even if things are terrible, even if I'm contemplating throwing him out of a window, or smothering him with a pillow, and thinking I'm in a country with no death penalty, so I'll be all right. And I've seen that your jails are actually pretty nice compared to American jails. You know, and then I say, but, you know, we're going to keep him alive because ultimately, you know, that's what we're doing. And so yes, the submission really does help get me through those moments.
Okay, hopefully that did answer your second question as well. Usually that's the case, no? So make it brief, and then we'll move the mic to someone else.
For Georg, the growing up with Nazis as parents, and now this very loving relationship you have, where it's brutal as well. Is that for you a way of getting your past and your love together? Am I making myself clear? No.
No, definitely not. It is so two different stories. I am ashamed and I feel a little bit guilty that it took a long time until I could accept the truth. And I just want to say...
You were 20, that's not that long.
Of course, yeah, but I should...
You did good.
Okay, good. And,
For a Nazi child.
being from an Austrian Nazi family and being here in the Netherlands is for me also very intense, and I just want to say thank you that you don't have anything, that you don't feel any collective.
My parents were wrong in the war as well.
That's definitely this does not have any. Maybe my family has some sadistic wishes. My uncle became part of the Waffen-SS. I do believe in sadism. I do this. I think this is better.
I will give one brief anecdote, and I will say that when he first came into the scene, to the kink scene, and I told him that lots of people actually specifically have these fantasies about doing, SS and Nazi roleplay, and he's like, this is terrible. And I said, of the people I've met, I'm going to tell you, big secret, they're Jews. And he couldn't believe it. He was like, why would you do that? And I said, why would I use the S word on myself? That's nuts. And many black people will tell you, yes, she's nuts. She's a terrible human being. But what happened was I said, if you ever decide that you do get over your inhibition about it, I have about 10 women who are very happy to have you scream at them in German. And like over the next couple of years, he's like, how many women? And we actually wound up doing this scene. And I tell people that BDSM is not therapy, but it can be therapeutic. Yeah? And the woman who did this scene, it was a demonstration scene for a class, and she lost family in the war and in the Holocaust, and Georg obviously was family of people who were perpetrators, and they were going to do an interrogation scene, and we talked about it. Everyone, again agreed on consent, what the parameters were, and this scene actually wound up for both of them being extremely cathartic, and at the end they were able to hug. And at the end, people in the room were like, how have we gotten to this place where the descendants of people who suffered these atrocities can hold the people who committed them? And that was an amazing moment. And it gives you hope, and this is how perversion can actually give you a little bit of hope in the rest of the world. It's sexual psychodrama. It helps you to see those things happen. And the hilarious side note is that he was like worried about coming up with enough interrogation material. So I said, well, she doesn't speak German, so it doesn't matter. He's like, okay, I know what I'm going to do. So we got to the thing, we did the class, and when I introduced the topic, I said, who here speaks German? Because you guys, the Germans, they get everywhere. You won't stop. Like, everywhere you go, it's fucking Germans. And there were 4 people in the class of maybe about 150 people who spoke German. So I went to each of them before the scene started, and I spoke to them, and they were like, okay. They did the scene, and people are crying, and it's incredibly emotional. And then someone said, why did you talk to the Germans before the scene? And I said, it's because of the following. Georg didn't know what to say for this interrogation, so he is giving a recipe for Austrian beef soup. So he's up there, and my friend is up there, like shaking and crying and freaking out, and the whole audience is like, oh my God, and Georg is like, do not overboil the soup!
Abschäumen.
That's the most terrifying word in German language. There was a question over there.
Thank you very much for your being this open and honest with your relation, and thank you for this gorgeous film. I had just a very simple question. By seeing this film, I almost understood that this relation helped the both of you to be more clear with your feelings and with your past. And a question to Georg. If you compare your compositions before Melanie and after Melanie, in your expression, in your honesty with your music, what has been the effect of this relation, this elaboration, this honesty that brought this relation to you? And the second thing maybe is to Mollena, that I personally don't believe that there is a power struggle here. You are quite equal at this point, because intellectually you are very near to each other, so maybe it is already an overpassed problem, maybe, or struggle. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit if you want.
There was absolutely not a shift. For many decades, I composed about this Nazi past, and I wrote it, I thought, very clearly, and nobody understood it, or wanted it understood. Just one example, my violoncello concerto starts with a terrible cry, shouting of the full orchestra, and later there's a quotation of Franz Schweker opera, O Vater, dein trauriges Erbe, O Father, your sad heritage, and this cry comes again. For me, this was absolutely clear.
Yeah,
but
if you know, oh, Traube, mein Vater,
I wrote it even in the program notes. Everybody, yeah? And this was one of the motors of my artistic thing. Not all of my pieces are about this, but in the foreground, but maybe in the background, all of them are. And the only difference is that now I'm more free. And now I'm in general a more lucky person. Now I have I think now my music is less dark. And this has changed. But this I spoke in work when I was interesting. I could speak about my unusual sexual habit more easy than about my Nazi family. But after I have done the first step, I could do the second step. And since then I'm free, and maybe it changed into more freedom. Because I don't have to pull out these secret messages. It's not necessary to do this, and I can speak this in words, which is maybe much better.
I will say it's not that his.
Answer your question.
I will say it's not that your music has changed, but your life has changed, and therefore, by proxy, your music changes because you write very personally. About myself, I will say I don't think I use the word struggle to talk about the power exchange. There's not a struggle there. Of course, there is occasionally, but actually we're remarkably at peace. We have probably one horrible fight a year, you know, which we just had, which is great. And then we, you know, I take a month to recover from it. He's done in 12 hours, and then we continue. But what's interesting for me is that we are equals, of course. Our relationship is a relationship of unequal power between equal humans. So the fact is that there's a lot of stuff that I don't want to fucking do on a daily basis. But I do it because I do it for him. There are things I would never do for myself that I wouldn't want to do, but he wants to do them, so I'm like, okay, you're the submissive. And then ultimately at the end, my feeling is I'm proud that I achieved that. So is there a struggle within myself? Yes. Is there a struggle within the dynamic? Not often, very rarely. And usually the struggle comes from the normal human thing of today sucks, fuck this day, I don't want to do it. You know, and then it's tomorrow, and then you move on. And I hope that that answered your question.
Mollena, can you do the plug again? Because wouldn't it be awesome if you saw all these people tomorrow again?
Yes, it would. Please come. And also, you get like all the gory details of my horrible life, and you get to hear Georg's music, which is really rather striking. And if you've never experienced, this is your one shot because people really don't do contemporary music stuff. Like when I told people I was, you know, engaged to Georg and, you know, we were dating, of 2 or 5, I say probably like 3,000 or 4,000 people on my Facebook feed. 2,000 or 3,000 of them were like, we're so happy for you. 4 of them were like, oh my God, Georg Friedrich Haas! Ah! And no one else knew who the fuck he was. You know, even though he's consistently in like the top 10 of the best composers. And so I encourage you, especially if you have never gone to a contemporary music performance, to come and see it, because I'm awesome. Georg is awesome. This is all awesome, and you've seen awesome pieces of it. So Bas Riegers is awesome, the conductor. He's one of your local boys, so that's cool. Kleinform is awesome. They're not your local boys, but they're from close by.
Because we had to do this, because I'm afraid our time is up here.
Oh, no.
But I'm sure that you will be maybe around a little bit longer.
Yes, and actually,
otherwise,
yeah,
we have to
they
will be maybe around a little bit longer in case you have more.
I think we can meet
questions.
downstairs at 12.
I really would like to thank you and the audience for being with us tonight and staying with us, which is always amazing. And then, of course, please give a warm hand once again to Beatrice de May.